the doctrine of reserve, the idea that universalism shouldn't be taught explicitly and maybe should even be lied about by people who believe in it, seems to have been held by a number of theologians in the early church. Why was that, and was there some wisdom to it?
It was a common prejudice of the time that it was a doctrine for those of sufficiently elevated intellect and spiritual nature and education. This division that we tend to think is Gnostic among somatic, psychical, and pneumatic persons is actually quite just fairly common in late antiquity, and it was believed. I mean, it's even figures like Gregory of Nazianzus lifts the edge of the curtain occasionally in one sermon. He talks to those in a somewhat more elevated Katharevusa sort of voice. He talks to those who like himself know better than really to believe in a hell of eternal torment of retribution. He says, of course, there are those for whom you would want to think of these fires in a way more worthy of our God. Well, if it's more worthy of God, then of course it's the true story. Why? And I believe that there's a good reason to think that Maximus, the Confessor, held such a teaching in reserve, or that he maintained what he called, or what come to call, an honorable silence on it. And the honorable part of it is specifically this notion that one should not burden the minds of the mere somatic or even psychical Christians with doctrines beyond their ken, that they might misunderstand what they're hearing and take it as a warrant for a life of libertinism or vice, thinking that it's a doctrine of free grace, whereas in reality there's still a severe penalty to pay for the things we do to our souls in this life. It's very hard for us today to think that way. It's very hard for me to think that way. To me, it seems like lying. But there were, in antiquity, there was a sense of, prudential reserve in how you expressed things. And it simply would not have been considered a form of dishonesty to use the allegorical, and this is how they'd have seen it, the allegorical figures of Scripture, because they are true. You just have to know how to interpret them properly to understand that truth. Now, later, as time rolled along, of course, it became increasingly institutionally problematic to break with the prevailing language, But in the 4th century, in the latter half, Gregory of Nyssa obviously felt very little need to restrain himself when writing treatises, or even when writing the Oratio Catechetica, which was it wasn't actually written for catechesis. That is, it wasn't written for catechumens to read. It was written for those who trained catechumens. But we don't know. We don't know if he would have preached universalism as openly as he espoused it in his learned treatises.